This is part 2 of my hiking adventure on the Te Araroa Trail, specifically on the South Island of New Zealand. Te Araroa, day 23. I resupplied in Arthur's Pass and then hitched a ride back to the Te Araroa Trail. I was lucky enough to get a ride with fellow hikers from Sweden, the Netherlands, and New Zealand. The climb, a 650-meter ascent, took me up to Lagoon Saddle. It was a hot afternoon, but the views were incredible once I got above the tree line. Here are Alexander, Steen, and Nash at Lagoon Saddle. I chose to stay overnight at the small Lagoon Saddle A-frame hut, and had the hut all to myself. Day 24, I followed the valley downhill along the Harper River. This involved numerous river crossings. Eventually, the valley flattened out, making the hiking easier. Here are Mount Fitzwilliam and Mount Gargarus. I eventually reached Lake Coleridge and was fortunate enough to catch a ride to Methven, where I stayed for 2 nights. Day 26 back on the trail again on the west side of the Rakaya River. I got a ride from Methven back to the trail, a total of 50 kilometers with Methven transport. The hike started with an ascent of about 700 meters up the valley before the path leveled out. The terrain was easy to walk. Then it descended down the valley towards Coman's hut. I only made a brief stop at Coman's hut before continuing my hike. I then entered the valley where Round Hill Creek flows. I followed the river upstream, crossing it a staggering 56 times. Here's Clent Hill's saddle. Day 27. Here's a predator trap. I saw many of these. The landscape was easy and pleasant to hike through, and the views were fantastic. Here's Lake Emily. I followed Hakateri Heron Road for just under 5 kilometers. Potts River Car Park and Mount Potts Lodge were today's goal, with still a few kilometers left to hike. In the foreground is Potts River, and the massive Rangitata River is in the background. I considered crossing the Rangitata River, but didn't want to do it alone. After hiking 43 kilometers, I arrived at Mount Potts Lodge, where I stayed overnight. I was now trying to arrange transportation to Geraldine to get to the other side of the Rangitata River. It's 135 kilometers by road to reach the other side of the Rangitata River, where Te Araroa continues. Here's Geraldine, where I stayed overnight in my tent and arranged further transport for the next day. Day 29, on my way back to Te Araroa on the west side of the Rangitata River. Here's Bush Stream, which had to be crossed multiple times. I climbed up this valley. Now I'm heading back down into the valley and then up the other side. I've completed the first part of the 750-meter climb up from the valley. A young hiker is coming up behind me but isn't catching up. Here's Crooked Spur Hut, where I took a short break. Then I hiked further uphill and into the fog. Finally, I reached the pass. On the south side of the pass, the fog lifted. This is the upper part of Bush Stream. Here's Rael Hut, where I stayed overnight. Day 30, I started hiking at sunrise, 6:50 a.m. It was only 3.6 degrees. The trail climbs 600 meters up to Stag Saddle, which is the highest point on Te Araroa, at 1,925 meters above sea level. From Stag Saddle, there's an excellent view of the Alpine Mountains to the west, where we can also see Mount Cook, New Zealand's highest mountain. Coal River. Here's Lake Tekapo. Day 31. In Lake Tekapo, I rented a bike and cycled along the canals to Lake Ohau. Here's Lake Pukaki. It was fun cycling this stretch. And here's Lake Ohau. I stayed overnight near Lake Ohau. Day 32. The trail climbs 900 meters from Lake Ohau. Here's the Ahuriri River East Branch. Ahuriri River. Luckily, the water flow wasn't too high, so it was easy to wade across. Here's Tin Hut, where I stayed overnight. Day 33. I started hiking before sunrise. There's an 800-meter climb up to Martha Saddle. Here's Martha Saddle. Timaru River. I had lunch at Top Timaru Hut. The valley sides now become steep and many choose to walk directly in the riverbed. I decided to continue on the path for a few kilometers before dropping down into the riverbed. A hiker sadly died in this river valley a few weeks ago. There's a lot of silt in the river, making it difficult to see how deep the pools are. I finally left the valley floor and the riverbed and climbed 500 meters up to Stodi's hut, where I camped overnight. Day 34. From Breast Hill, there's a fantastic view over Lake Hawea. It's a steep descent down to Lake Hawea. Where the trail met the road, I got a pleasant surprise. My first trail magic on Te Araroa. Amazing. Day 36. Starting from Lake Wanaka, and it's raining. The fog is quite thick at times. At Jack Hall's saddle, the clouds finally broke, giving me a stunning view of the rugged yet beautiful valley ahead. Lunch at Highland Creek Hut. There was possum poo in the water tank and people got sick. I continued along the ridge lines towards Rose's hut. Here's Rose's hut, where I stayed overnight. Day 37. The fog makes the landscape magical at Rose's saddle. Down in the valley, the Arrow River flows. Now it's many kilometers of walking directly in the Arrow River itself. Finally, the valley widens and I'm done with the cold river walk. Macetown, once a small mining town, now only one building remains. Here's Big Hill Saddle. Arrowtown is in sight. I had lunch in Arrowtown before continuing to Frankton, where I camped overnight. Day 38, Queenstown. From Queenstown, you need to arrange transportation for 80 kilometers to the west side of Lake Wakatipu, where Te Araroa continues. The trail is wide and nice for 12 kilometers along the Greenstone River to Greenstone Hut. After Greenstone Hut, it's back to a rougher trail. Here's Taipo Hut, where I stayed overnight. Day 39. Today was an easy landscape to hike through, though in some places the grass was very tall. Here's the swing bridge at Boundary Hut. Araroa River. Here's North Mavora Lake. Mavora Lake campsite, where I camped overnight. Day 40, South Mavora Lake. Now the trail follows Mavora Lake's road. Day 41, Princhester Road, sheep country. The landscape is changing. Forest, tall grass and mud. Here's Aparima Hut, a typical New Zealand hut. Day 42. As usual, I started hiking before sunrise. I had lunch at Lower Wairaki Hut. For the first time since I started hiking, I saw the ocean on the horizon. Here's Dougie's hut. The toilet at Dougie's hut. Day 43, a bit of light rain in the morning. Thousands of sheep. The Wairaki River had to be waded. Here's Birchwood Station, where I stayed overnight. This is actually an old station building from when there was a railway here. Day 44, sheep being loaded into trucks. Here's Mara View Hut. Day 45, Longwood Forest. Now begins the dreadful muddy section. Suddenly, out of nowhere, trail magic. Thank you so much. Here's Martin's hut, with cola cans on the table. Day 46, it's like a jungle. Here's Turnbull's hut. Finally done with the mud. And here's Colac Bay and the ocean. Day 47, Riverton. A 24-kilometer hike on the beach. I started early to walk during low tide. Day 48, I stayed overnight in Invercargill and started the last day of the trip in dense fog. The route followed Bluff Highway south to Bluff. Here's Bluff and Sterling Point, and finally the Te Araroa southern terminus.